Hello, and welcome to another episode of BodyTalks Live. Okay. It just gave me a notification that I was live, so I'm like, I'm on the right account, right? But I'm so excited to be back for another episode and very, very excited today just to hang with our guest, Kaleigh, who I will introduce in a moment, but she's also a very good friend of mine. And we've worked together in many capacities. So I'm very excited for this conversation and just to have, some one-on-one time with her and bring her story to light. And if you haven't been plugged into the rest of these, definitely go back and watch the replays. They're available here on YouTube, in my Facebook group called the Self-Love Club, and they are all definitely worth watching. And my vision for this, or my why for doing these, is in celebration of my book, Someone I Love Lives Here, which comes out in 3 weeks, 3 weeks from tomorrow, you guys. It's going by so fast. So definitely pre-order a copy on Amazon. That would mean the world to me. I am holding the vision to hit #1 bestseller and would love your support. But this book is my story and my journey with body image and disordered eating and, really coming out on the other side of it, going on this healing journey to work through these issues, to get into a place where I'm living true food freedom and, switching up my thought patterns, no longer being so critical of myself, all of these amazing things. So that is what my book is about. But I know that I am not alone in these struggles, and so many women deal with this stuff. So many women, well over 90% of women, report having negative body image, and it's something that affects way too many of us, and I believe takes away so much woman power. We are putting way too much energy and giving way too much of our headspace to things that don't really matter, really in the big picture of our lives. So that is why it's on my heart to bring other women's stories forward as well, and share, both the struggles and what it really looked like for them, and then also share tips and pieces of their healing journey so that that one, you are totally not alone, and two, healing is so possible. I truly believe you can rise up from anything, and I believe wherever you are today, you can be somewhere totally different. Maybe not overnight, but if you are committed to it and you believe you can get there, you absolutely can. And thank you. MJ says, love your flannel, fall goals. I know it's like really hot out actually, but I'm ready for fall. So I love a nice flannel. So super excited, like I said, to dive into this conversation. And before we do that, I also want to note that my Empowered Eating Method program is open again. We start 4 weeks from tonight. And it is my favorite thing in the world to teach. In about 1 month, you can completely be in a different place with food, your body, your thought patterns, your habits around food and exercise and all of that stuff. So definitely go look at, the link is in my bio under Empowered Eating Method. If that speaks to you, definitely check it out and send me a DM if you do have any questions or just want to chat and see if the program is right for you. So Kaleigh, I saw you pop in here, so just send a request when you have a chance and I will bring Kaleigh on. But like I said, you guys, I am so excited to have this conversation with Kaleigh because she is a dear, dear friend of mine. I was thinking just before I went live how long I've known her. I think it's about 4 years now, 4 years since we met. And we've worked together in so many capacities on so many different projects, and we're super passionate about a lot of the same things. So I am just beyond excited to have her here with me. And Kaleigh is an artist focusing on the medium of photography and filmmaking. She believes documentary film, installation art, and vulnerability through storytelling are powerful tools that advance consciousness and compassion in humanity. And really cool note as well, Kaleigh was one of my beta readers last year. She actually read my manuscript, my book, along with 3 others, and provided some feedback that I definitely, took to heart and worked into the rewrite, the final version, which is now available. So really, really cool little side note. And I'm trying to accept the request. It's not working. Hmm, this is strange and new. And I hate to do this, but oh, there we go. I was gonna say Mercury just went retrograde, so like obviously, right?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's my first time doing it on Instagram, so I'm all nervous.
Oh, don't be. I know everyone says that, and I definitely feel that way whenever I go live too. So, but it's just you and I chatting like always. So,
Totally.
how's your day going?
Good. Yeah.
Good. Mhm. Awesome. Well, I did a little intro, but I'd love to hear just kind of you, whatever you want to share personally, professionally, but a little bit more about you.
Perfect. Yeah. I've been an artist for a long time. I mainly work in the medium of film and photography. I photographed you many times and always have a good time. And lately, I work in two capacities. Obviously, I have like the projects that it's my way of making money. This is my way of making a living, and also I have my passion projects. So a lot of the work that I do on the passion side is in order to break stigmas through the art of storytelling. And so we really hit it off with our stories with disordered eating. Obviously, we're here now. But that was a big one for me. And just I've shared a lot of clips from that project, and then moving into work dealing with suicide prevention and really breaking stigmas around mental illness, even if you want to use that term. But that's really where I'm at now, and just trying to find myself. What's the balance between I'm finding everything so heavy and like I love the art therapy process of creating, but also sometimes I'm like everything I'm doing is so heavy, like where's the fun and lightness? And it's actually in exchanges like this where I feel that. So I'm really honored to be here. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And yeah, we always do have a really good time. Our last photo shoot was so funny. We were like in front of my building and I wore slippers down and then popped my heels on like right when we were taking the photos. Because I had you guys, if you've seen the blue power suit, pantsuit. But yeah, this girl was moving, so she was like hanging out nearby, just like laughing at us because it is, if you've done a photo shoot, you know that it's like the images you get are one thing, and then the behind the scenes is like hilarious and totally different. So, yeah, but we always have so much fun together.
Yeah,
So,
she's my favorite. I think of her all the time. Like we always need that cheerleader. You know what I mean? The stranger, the witness. It was fun.
yes, yeah, totally. So I would love to dive into your story and go all the way back to your earliest memory of struggling with body image or kind of having this sense of needing to control or change what you eat for the sake of, controlling your weight or anything like that. I'd love to hear your earliest memories of these things.
Oh boy. It's funny in retrospect, right? Because now that we're in our 30s and like I'm very much out of it. But then you go back, and for so long in my 20s, I was like in that victimhood mentality where it's like this thing happened and that's why I was the way I am. But now that I've like done a lot of soul searching and meditation, like I've realized those moments aren't as anymore. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So it's funny when you ask me that, I'm like, oh God. But I know I still have an answer. It was funny. I always wanted to be like my best friend growing up, and like she was just perfect to me and beautiful, and like the family and the house. And so I always tried to follow in her footsteps, whatever she did, even though I was not good at a lot of those things. And so at like 4 years old, I remember a gymnastic coach telling my mom that if I didn't start lifting soup cans or like running around the house to lose weight, then I didn't have a career in gymnastics. I was literally like 4 or 5 years old. And it's fun because we've talked about this a lot. Like I remember that obviously, and I was very young, and I wasn't even fat in my opinion, but um, I it was like when you said that you didn't know. People talk about you when you're a kid as if you're not a human being, and it's like I was standing there listening to every single word, and I didn't take it personal because I wasn't sure what that meant. But obviously stuck with me. I'm 30, almost 33 years old, and like it makes me want to cry right now. But that was probably the first one where it was like I have to manipulate my body in order to fit in and be loved and be like my best friend who I love so much. Therefore, I thought I had to do that in order to feel the way I felt about her, which
Mhm.
I just kind of put that together now. But that was probably the first because I was little. Um, And then, but we were so busy. Like I was the oldest, and I was in every sport possible. So I feel for my parents, like working full-time jobs and driving all around. But I was raised through the McDonald's drive-through. So, and at 4, I wasn't eating Happy Meals. Like I was eating the Big Mac, whatever meal, or the 2 cheeseburgers. I don't even know the numbers anymore. But it was like, of course I was larger because I was eating like that, you know, and I didn't have any other education, no basis in nutrition as a kid at all. I had to do all of my own studying. So I was larger as a child, basically just because of our lifestyle. And although I was super active, never like in front of the TV, I was always playing sports or outside. It caught up with me, and rather quickly, because I look back at all my pictures, and basically probably from that time frame, like kindergarten, yeah, elementary school, I mean, I was just a larger person. And I remember wanting to shop at the Limited Two, right? Do you remember?
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
I couldn't fit in anything. Like I wanted, and I remember now, again, being an adult, like the look at my mom's face when you're a kid, and it's just like, why don't you want to go there? And like she knew that I couldn't fit in any of those clothes, and it was painful for her probably to witness all of that, like me getting so excited and then nothing works. And so that happened for years and years and years, but I never understood, I never thought that I had an issue. And then all of a sudden I hit adolescence, and then it was a huge issue because I just chose to stop eating. And then I realized that, oh, that made me skinny. And that was it. I just like clawed onto that.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So many similarities in our
Yep.
stories, as you know. But it is crazy. I love what you said about, that people think kids aren't listening, or they're not going to understand, or like, talk like they're not in the room, or like, oh, they don't know what's going on. And it's like, it couldn't be further from the truth, because yeah, children don't know what's going on, but they're also like absorbing all of it. They're little sponges, and then they're making meaning of things. So it is interesting, and my first instance of feeling like something was wrong with me or my body, or I wasn't good enough, or I was overweight, was the same thing. It was like, overhearing a doctor talk to my mom, or and I think it's crazy too with a lot of these stories on the Body Talks episodes. I hear from so many women, like in dance or gymnastics or these things, like as little kids, that should be a really positive experience. And instead, someone's saying something like so awful to a child, that you should be losing weight. It's crazy. Like, I cannot imagine.
I know. I think
But
and also I remember like the uniform even ordering was an issue because I think they had to order like a junior size versus a kid size for me. And I love just dancing. I love going and watching the older kids like before my class, which is funny now that I'm like a filmmaker. But I remember watching, I've always just wanted to observe people doing amazing things in their element. And why aren't we taught to just feel in our element? Like we're always taught to perform or to be a specific way. Like when you're describing that, I'm like, yeah, as a kid, I mean, I dance now in my living room because it feels good. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
even as a child, we weren't taught that. It wasn't taught to like feel good in your body. It was like, this is a competition because you have to, maybe you can make the next year's dance team or something. And
mhm.
it's messed up. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, that's a really interesting point. And just because that's a big theme in my book too, is like this competitive nature with other women. And it is like we're taught so young to like, I definitely didn't get the message that movement could just be something that feels good or is, good for you, for your mental well-being, or, other aspects. It's always like, that's even my memories of gym class, like, are so horrendous because I was so bad at everything and always felt like such a loser because of that, because it's very like, everything is competition and trying to be the best. It's like, okay, again, with kids, can't they just move because it feels good and like do what comes naturally? But
Hmm.
um, yeah, and then the nutrition aspect too. My mom still is like, oh, if I could go back in time and this and that. And I'm like, it was part of my journey, like very grateful for all of it. But, it's just a different era where we really didn't have nutrition information. I mean, the low fat craze was still really in, which is so backwards and not based in science. So there just wasn't, there wasn't as much available, I think, for parents or kids back when we were young. So that makes it really tough too, that you just I think both as a parent and a child going through that, it's like not really knowing how to remedy the situation. And I think that's very delicate too, with you mentioned with your mom, just that being heartbreaking to watch. And I'm curious how, how that was, if she ever made any comments or like ever kind of steered you toward any like weight loss habits, or if she was just completely on the other side. And like, did she acknowledge it?
When I was a kid, I don't remember her making any kind of snarky comments or being competitive
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But as an adult, like she would never say she has an issue. I wouldn't even say she has an issue like I did and what I've experienced. But the things she says, it's just like everything has to do with exercise. If we're walking a certain way, it's like, oh, you're like really holding your core well, or like that looks like a core exercise. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just there's all these like little comments that she's very obsessed with exercise, which is fine if that's her journey, but like don't project that onto every single human all the time. And it's like, my struggles. Why are you still? There's not a lot of self-awareness there,
Mm-hmm.
and I've understood that that's not my problem and that's not my business. Like that's been the best life lesson I've ever gotten, is like, that's not my business. You know what I mean? Or that's none of your business. So I say that a lot when I hear comments that do initially trigger me. And then I'm like, whoop, pull it in. Like that's none of my business. So it definitely still, I have two younger siblings, and they feel some of that because they've had more time at home. But I left the coop at an early age, but I needed to. Like it was too much for me. So it's interesting looking back. I definitely think I was negatively influenced through the nutrition and the food part, from both parents. Again, they did the best they could. Like this isn't me blaming them. It's just like I want better for myself, and I went the route that went really bad, and then in order to learn from that. So I'm super grateful, like you said too. But yeah, it's interesting to now I can just observe and leave what I don't need behind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah. And I mean, it is really hard when you do work to heal and kind of get to the other side of some things, and then you hear people who are, maybe still stuck or fixated on the body in like a way that's not really healthy and not really empowering. I know, it's just hard to hear that stuff, and it's hard to see someone still there too. I think once you know what's like available and how good it can be, we're not hyper focused on those things. And
Right.
uh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I think, and then when I was like really in my journey, I started realizing like the seeker, one of my good friends, and I'll call her mentor, she said something recently that was like, how long are you going to sit and stare at your navel? Have you ever heard that?
Mm-mm.
It's like, if how long are you going to be in that zone of seeking and meditating and searching, like soul searching, versus when are you going to start going out and living? And she said that to me like months ago, but I just finally feel like it integrated. And I was like, oh wow, I've been seeking for the last 10, 15 years, which we could also use the word healing. And now I might look like the least spiritual I've ever looked, but I'm actually the most embodied and living in my spirit and my truth on an everyday basis. And so that reminds me of that. Like I can't fix anybody. And when I was so inward and so in my seeking healing phase, I kind of got obsessed with that too. And then that became like, if you're not on your path, I'm going to show you the way. And like, I wanted to kind of do that for everybody, and especially my family.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized they don't want it. And for a long time, I got offended by that, because I'm like, what do you mean? Like, the light's here. Like, why don't you want to be in the light? And it's like, oh, okay, if you want to be glued to the TV and eat that way and live that way, like, again, that's none of my business, and that's okay. And then I can't take offense to that. I can't be an elitist to that either. And I think that was that's something I've learned just in the last 2 years, is to really like stay on my own path. And and also again, this theme of like, my path is also no one else's business. Like I keep my sacred pretty sacred and close to me. And that almost makes it more special, because I'm not always flaunting it. I'm not giving that energy away, but the people who want to learn and who want to share, like with you, like it's an equal exchange, you know. For so long, I feel like I was just giving everything away to people who could kind of care less about it. And
Yeah.
then I was like, then I had to seek more. you know, it was like this perpetual cycle. And it's like, am I healing, or am I just on that hamster wheel of thinking that I'm doing the right thing?
Hmm. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And when I started coaching, I could say I coached both my parents and my husband, and like, and that's the hardest, is the people you love the most, and you're like, I know what's best. So, you know what I mean? But remembering that like everyone is on their own journey, and yeah, and that's very true. Makes me think a lot as a projector in human design as well, where you have to wait for the invitation. And I think that's just true anytime with this kind of work is, yeah, if someone doesn't want it and they're not really open to it, then nothing you can say is really going to get through either. It's not going to land if they're not open to receiving it at that time. So then it does leave you just kind of drained, or, you know, frustrated that they're not, it's not clicking. But, you know, we have to, again, like wait till it's energetically appropriate, I guess, to share those things. Or and just by living authentically and like being the example, like you even said, like everything's more integrated than ever before with your spirituality and just being, you know, more and more connected to yourself. It's like that in itself is really powerful, just showing up like that every day. You know, I think it gives people the expander that they need, that it is possible to heal. And, you know, I think especially for those closest to you, who I know you were in a really low, dark place, and to be where you are now, you know, it is this incredible transformation. So I think anyone who knows you, again, you don't even really have to say anything. It's just like who you are in the world is testament to the work you've done.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, and I know you don't mind going there, but I would love to get into, we kind of talked about how, where it all started for you, but I just mentioned the low point, like what that looked like for you, what that experience was like. Because I think, again, it is really, really powerful for people to know where you've been and where you are now, just to share that hope that, you know, you can get into a very different place. So,
Yeah, sure. Um, yeah, I mean, it was from a very young age. Like, once I say that I don't, like, I didn't experience like I wasn't bullied or anything. I was actually really friends with everybody growing up. And then we moved when I was like a 10-ish, 10 years old, and that was really hard on me. Like, I didn't want to leave. Like, my bubble was perfect where we lived in Michigan, and I just like loved that place and those people. So to be ripped out of that and then put into it was like the fourth quarter of fourth grade. So that age, like, everybody was still nice to me and welcoming, but I felt like it was a downgrade from where we lived prior. So I didn't like our new house. I didn't like my new school. Like, the people dressed differently. Like, the kids were swearing, and I was like, "What's happening?" It was when Stone Cold Steve Austin like was all the rage, you know. So all the kids
okay.
wrestling, and all the kids in Michigan, like, we liked Nickelodeon. Do you know what I mean? It was strange, and I felt very isolated and alone. And that was when, I mean, again, now that I know what I know, like, I think I really did have, I've always had depression. So that was just something that kind of elevated it. And then I really just started kind of going inward and like listening to music constantly, whatever. I was just kind of sad from that period till today, let's say. But so then once I kind of turned that depression, I mean, years and years I was like obsessed with moving back to Michigan. Like, it was always a thing. I was like, life would have been better if, you know, it was like constant grass is greener, because, and it's weird because it's like right across the lake. So even as a young kid, I would go to the lake and like cry thinking about my friends on the other side of the lake. But I was just sad. It made me really sad. And then eventually I attached that sadness to feeling numb felt better than feeling sad. And so the ways that I could feel numb, I'm fast forwarding to, like, I started drinking when I was 14, and like my parents, nobody in my family drinks. So I had my chosen family at that point, and I just wanted to be kind of wild and crazy and like go to all these shows and talk to all these older boys and be cool. And I was obsessed with that. And so the numbing came, and then I started to realize I actually went vegan at 15 from that whole like hardcore metal scene. Like, all the kids were vegan, and you know what I mean? And so I did that with intentions of helping animals and to learning about all of the inhumane things that were happening. But it was also a way to get skinny quick. and I still wasn't in the body that I wanted to be. I've always been friends with like the most popular girl, and I was like second or third in line. Like always, I could name everybody, even like it's kind of crazy. So I always felt like I had to compete with that perfect person, and it never felt like that in real life. But you know how girls are, and that competition that you're talking about again. Um, and like these girls were like perfect, you know what I mean? Like perfect body, perfect everything. And I never was that. So I was always trying to be like them. So we would drink, I would throw up, drugs started getting involved, sex started getting involved, you know, all through college. And then, but at 17, I moved out and I moved to Chicago. So I was living alone in the South Loop going to Columbia College. I was like, I go down there, I'm like, I was 17, like riding the train, and it's kind of crazy. But I loved it. Like I was so in my element and busy that it was another excuse to just totally stop eating. And I was walking everywhere. I didn't have a car. And that's when everything started kind of getting really bad. Like the fact that I loved feeling empty. Like it's still me saying that. I don't like saying that because I still do like that feeling, and it can be still sort of triggering. But so I learned how to numb through drugs and alcohol. And then I learned how to love my body by feeling empty, which was just starving myself. And then that started turning into suicidal ideation. And being in Chicago, I was right outside the building. Like the red line was right outside my building. And so I take the train all the time, and I would just obsess about jumping in front of the train. Like that was just a regular thing on every day, all day. It was just normal to me. And that's obviously not a normal thought. Eventually I moved back to Milwaukee because I realized I could not afford private art school in the city of Chicago. And the suicidal thoughts were just always with me for a very, very long time. And eventually the night that I planned on doing it, I always say like classically, I was like crying on my bathroom floor, you know, it's like all these songs and poems are made about it. And yeah, you know, this sounds crazy, but it's not. But I was literally like in a fetal position crying. And then like with my eyes closed, I saw a light that came and visited me. And they said, use this pain for good. And I just kept hearing that over and over again, like use this pain for good. And that was enough to get me up off the floor. I remember I sent my mom an email, like, I'm not okay. I didn't ask for help, but I just told her, I'm like, kind of pay attention, kind of was what I was saying. She called me right away, and I couldn't really speak to her. But then I started researching to go into therapy, and I found a psychologist that I connected with. So that was the first step. But that was in 2011, 2012, maybe. And I wouldn't say until 2019 did everything start really changing for me. I knew I didn't want to die anymore. So that was good, right? Since that moment. But I had no idea how to be alive. And I don't think we talk about that enough, because it's like, oh, great, you're not suicidal anymore. And it's like, so now I want to live, but I have no idea how to. Like if I don't want to use drugs or drink or sleep with strangers, I hate my job, I'm not using my degree. Like, what am I supposed to do? And I lived in that for a good chunk of 10 years of my adult life, you know? And then eventually I was waiting tables, and I couldn't afford therapy. I couldn't afford to heal myself. So then there was this guilt of going broke in order to feel good. So that didn't work. So then I turned to travel. So then I became obsessed with any country that I can go to. And again, I would started obsessing with the seeking, which was good because that's much better than obsessing with the getting drunk or, you know, and so things really did shift. I moved to Australia in 2016, I think. So I was there for a year, and I did this amazing thing called a Vipassana retreat. I think, have I told you a little bit about that?
It's the silent retreat,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's no joke.
So it's actually 12 days, but 10 days are complete silence. No eye contact, no reading, no writing. You literally sit for 10 hours a day in meditation, and then you have a couple meals, wake up at 4:30, lights out at 10, chanting. Like, it was incredible. But the funny thing is, it's a Buddhist retreat. You eat vegan and sattvic diet for those 10 days they provide for you. But what happened to me, the biggest life shift, was that I kept hearing a voice that said, you need to start eating meat. And I was vegan vegetarian since I was 15. So hearing that at a Buddhist retreat was like a little bit ironic. But what it meant was like, you're finally ready to have food freedom. Like, you really need to get over yourself and stop obsessing over food and your weight and start being in your body. Because that was the first time I think I was actually ever truly, truly inside of myself versus always thinking about what other people were thinking of me or seeing myself in this horrible light that I'm not, but I didn't know how to not be that darkness. And then I started to shift more into the light. But again, it was like super scary, uncharted territory. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. So then I became obsessed with meditation for a long time, and not in the sense of healing or to feel in my body, but like to get answers, like fix me is what it started turning into. But that was incredible. And obviously travel, I think, is super healing. I was by myself, just a solo person with a backpack. So it was, yeah, that was super important to my healing journey. But the question was the lowest. That was the lowest when I was at my point of suicide. And I obviously I didn't even attempt, but I was very, very close.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's just, even though I've heard it different ways, it's just such a powerful, powerful story. And what you shared too with, like, again, like, okay, I'm no longer wanting to die, I want to be alive, but like not knowing how to really do that and how to feel good. Because I think again, just, culturally, I don't even think it's exclusively our culture, but I think we're taught very young that, again, it's kind of that performance. It's like everything needs to look good and we need to please others. I think especially as women, that it's more about looking good and keeping others comfortable than like you actually living in a fulfilling, authentic way. Like, that's never really talked about. It's kind of like, do X, Y, Z, and this is what looks good on paper. And so I think so many of us, especially I think our generation is really like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want that lifestyle. Like, you know what I mean? Like, go to college, get a good job, do this, like, again, we could be X, Y, Z. And I think for a lot of us, it's not super fulfilling. And
Right. And that conditioning for a long time, like, caused more depression and anxiety. Cause I was like, I knew that it's almost like I did know myself too well as a child, but I was so disconnected from that, because who I am and what I remembered and wanted to be was the total opposite of what everyone was telling me to do. And again, I wanted to be like everybody else so bad. And it's like, wasn't that obvious to the authority figures in my life? I just wish we would have been taught, like, you are awesome in your own, like, and what makes you feel good. This is a funny story. I started getting like way into kickboxing this last 6 months. And like, I love it, like, to the point where I feel I'm too old to be a fighter. I feel like, but if I would have gotten into this as a child, like, I really think there's a good chance that I'd be a competitive fighter. Like, I love it. And I would never expect that of me. But I had a conversation with my mom. This is so funny. I must have been like PMSing, because I was like, Mom, why didn't you put me in karate as a kid? Like, I was genuinely angry at her. This was just a couple months ago. And I was like, but I wish that I mean, this is, again, we have the lessons and then we can pass it on to our children, right? And so I just hope that I'm the mother that I see them for who they are and not what I want them to be. And then just ask them, like, what are we going to do today? Like, what makes you feel excited? And obviously you have to try a lot of things to find what sticks. And I could be talking crazy because I don't have children, but I'm so excited that I have finally been able to reflect on those experiences, and in order to, like, bring another being into this world and hopefully allow them to shine in the ways that I couldn't, because I felt restricted from so many elements. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm like halfway through. It's a book called The Knowing, and it's by Wayne Dyer's daughters.
Oh, interesting.
Passed away, and they talk about growing up with him. And if you guys aren't familiar, he's written a ton of books since like the 70s. He's a spiritual healer, teacher, and like, he was one of the first people that when I started my personal development journey, that I kind of latched onto. So it's really cool reading. But with his daughters, they say that since they were like toddlers, he was always like, you do know what to do. Like, he always empowered them to, like, he would not tell them what to do or how to do it or anything like that. Like, really just let them be their own little people. And I think that's so special. I think again, it's easy, and I, again, I'm not a parent, and it's easy to think like, oh, well, I would do this and I would put them in that and they'd be really good at this, again, like because of what I wish I had done, as a child. It's just funny. It's like I think it's, a very interesting dance with not trying to impose your desires on your child and just totally letting them be their own unique little human.
Definitely.
So, yeah. So I'd love for you to share the story about you got to the point where you went to Australia. And I love this story because you had a really empowering experience with social media. So you were on a beach.
Yep.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that story.
I was at Sparrow. It was a Sparrow. I think it's called Sparrow. Try to picture it in my head. So I was living in Byron Bay, if anybody's been there, but it's a little tiny surf town. It has like 5,000, population 5,000, but there's like 15,000 people there at all times because it's so touristy. It's beautiful. It's a surfer's paradise. Like it's just amazing. So I was a nanny there. And so I was, again, like really getting into my spiritual practice, and I would wake up with the cockatoos because you can't not. And I would walk or bike over to Clark's Beach, meditate with the sunrise. And then once the sun came up over the mountain, like I knew that my time was done because I was in sync with that. And then I would go treat myself to a coffee out and then go take care of the child all day. So that was kind of my routine. And this one morning, something obviously wasn't going well in my being, because I was sitting at the coffee shop and I searched #eating disorder because I was looking for like pro anorexia accounts to like trigger me to stop eating again. And what I found instead was like eating disorder recovery, because at that point, that was when Instagram started censoring certain things. Like you couldn't search. If you searched #eating disorder, it would like do a little pop-up like, are you okay? kind of thing. And so then it shifted to something positive, which I was not expecting or ready for at all. So then that's when I started seeing like body positivity or body neutrality or normalized normal bodies. And I was like, what? Because again, our generation, like we're from what model era, is that what they call it? And I had never, I don't think I'd ever had seen like a full-bodied person like excited to post a picture of themselves. And so once I saw that there was this community of people that were doing that were like posting pictures of themselves and celebrating it, even though they weren't a size 0, that just blew my mind. And again, this was 2016, I think, 2015. So it's not that long ago, but it really was like soul shaking and changed my entire world, to the point where the next day I posted a picture. I was walking to Clark's Beach again. And it's funny because like my like, what's the even word? I don't even know, like scary area, like the super low belly. And so the picture, I still crop that off, but to just show a bikini picture of me in general, like there was a point in my early 20s where my friend was trying to Photoshop all of us together because we kind of all moved on from each other, but we all wanted to be together. And she had to superimpose my head on a fake body because I didn't have any pictures that weren't like this up from my entire forever. So that was a huge deal for me to show me in a bikini. And then I started my Instagram account called My Disordered Eating, and I started pairing that with an old blog that I had that journeys up to when I was going to kill myself. And eventually that turned into me starting to document people like you telling their stories also. But that was really life-changing, to the fact where I was trying to get back into my disorder, but a hashtag shifted me to the point of finding what body positivity was. And I had no idea that existed. So that was pretty,
yeah. So many powerful, your spirit team loves you and looks out for you, as all of them do, but some really powerful signs and nudges in your story as well, which is so beautiful. But I love that story because, I know social media has, like anything else that's new in technology, there's the pros and the cons, but like as much as it's easier than ever for people to use things like Photoshop, Facetune, filters, all of these things, I also think like we talked about, like we weren't exposed to anything growing up that, normalizing different body types. It was always like there was one. We've even talked about the trends in body types, how right around the time, I know when I was graduating high school, like what was in was the Olsen twins, Lindsay Lohan, uh, Nicole Richie, these bodies that were completely emaciated and, um, with like bones popping out and stuff. And like, I can remember as a teenager, I wanted to look like that. And then we talked about how shortly after that, I feel like, J-Lo, Kardashians, now it's like, there's these trends in body types too, but at least now, like in the past year, I've definitely gone on websites where jeans or swimsuits, things like that, you'll see them on different body types and you'll see stretch marks in the pictures. And, these things that are, I feel like so many women have stretch marks and cellulite and all of this stuff. But then when we're never seeing it, we just feel like we're the special sort of damaged as you know, as we've talked about. But yeah, I do love that aspect of social media that we get to see so much more of it. And even those posts, I know there's a ton of them out there, but even showing like, okay, this is what I look like in these angles, from this particular angle when I'm posed, and this is how I look when I sit down, like freaking everyone else.
Yeah.
We have stomach rolls, and like that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Yeah.
do love about social.
I want to have I've tried to have these conversations with like teenage girls to see, but sometimes they look at me blankly and I'm like, cause you didn't experience that. And it's really exciting for me cause they didn't have the Nicole Richie's, Britney Spears, you know what I mean? Like the low riders, they didn't experience that, but they have the pressure of this, and I wonder what's worse, because if I had Instagram in high school, like, no,
Mm-hmm.
when you were at your lowest, if this all, it's just think about, like, I love the Target and seeing different mannequin shapes, I love, like you said, on, I think it's, like on Madewell, you can search your model shape and then they show you the jeans on your size. Like that's amazing to me, because of course everything looks good on like this body, but I'm like, well, what would that look like on me, and then now we actually have an option. It's so helpful to be able to do that. But I wonder about the younger generations, and like we obviously want to be an example to them and a light to them, but there's so much that has changed so quickly that I don't know, it's just interesting. I'm not sure if you've ever had any of these conversations with younger girls. Oh, the girl on the airplane.
Yeah. Not a ton. And it's interesting what you said too. It's just like clicking for me because I'm like, when I was at my lowest, that was also when I was like heavily on my Facebook page. And I think that in itself, like you said, as a teenager, like I think with social media, there's a lot of pressure to make your life and yourself look, really perfect and amazing and, noteworthy. And I think that could really be, I don't know, that could be a really tough thing as you're figuring out who you are and like what you actually want to do with your life. And that age, where again, we're talking about like performing versus being ourselves and how that's kind of taught to us. And I think social media puts pressure on sometimes too to perform or to be like, everything's amazing, even when it's not. And that was my experience for sure. Like when I was at my lowest, you would not know it from social media. So, it is interesting the different ways it can go. And yeah. So, one thing I'm like, we got to talk about this too, because I was like, so, I'll just share. I got an email recently for like a collab, like a sex toy company, and it was like, since you're so all about self-love, and I was like, you know what, like I'm all for that, like loving yourself in that way, but I was just like, like that's so interesting, and I was slightly offended. I was like, that's really not what I mean. But we've talked before about people's like misconceptions on when we talk about self-love, like what that means and how some people are really like, kind of almost turned off by the subject, which is so strange that, loving, honoring, caring about yourself would be such a radical, wild concept. But I'd just love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, my latest escape to Mexico one-way ticket. That was I did a 200-hour yoga teacher training. I was running from a lot of things that trip, but I was mostly trying to disconnect from my, at that point, like 10 8 years of serious Ashtanga yoga training. Like to go do a 200-hour training after doing Ashtanga yoga is like it's blasphemy. Like you can't do that. And so I was really trying to disconnect from that relationship, which also had a lot of negative experiences with my eating disorder and everything. So to learn from a different perspective, which was the Krishnamacharya method of Vinyasa yoga in Mexico, I came back to Wisconsin wanting to kind of teach everything that I knew from Ashtanga yoga, which not only is the yoga postures, but it's the whole 8 limbs and the way you integrate and live the principles of yoga. And then teaching the Vinyasa style, which a lot of Americans like because it's a workout and it gets you stretchy and flexible and it just feels good. So I wanted to take that to the next level and have women's circles. And I had this, what I thought was a genius name was Self-Love Club. And I started, like, I was all, again, still like yoga high. I had just gotten back from another magical journey. But I remember I was teaching at a Pilates studio and I was starting to promote it with signs and things. And I actually used that picture of myself on the beach in Byron, which is kind of funny. I just realized that now. And this woman, she's like, so it's like a masturbation circle? Like, what do you mean self-love club? And I was like, yes, we're right here. That's exactly what we're going to do. And yeah, my sense of humor, I can be a little abrasive, but I was like, I just remember looking at her like, really? You know, I was like, that's what we've come to. Like as women, we can't use the word self-love. Like it has to be about sex and it has to be like a masturbation circle. Like we can't just sit together and like feel and talk about it. Do you know? I mean, that sounds cheesy too, but it really is. I mean, women's circles, that's been some of the most amazing, amazing deep work that I've ever done. But yeah, the word self-love club, that's what it translated to. And yeah, I mean, masturbation, I think that's a huge part of self-love and like embodying and like getting into your divine feminine in many, many aspects. But that was not what I meant at all. Yeah. So yeah, it's just interesting. And I think that came, I mean, I know that came from a place in her of just total projection and like way over masculine energy, like, you know, I could talk about that for a long time, but it's just super interesting that we can't just openly talk about self-love. In a way, it's almost more, I've gone more towards self-awareness and acceptance versus the word love, because I think, because it has such a bad connotation and it's not necessarily wanted to do that, but it's almost like I had to neutralize the word in order, even for me, my own psyche, to understand it and to, again, that word integrate, like go into it more. The word acceptance and awareness feels safer than the word love.
Yeah, yeah. I feel that. And it is interesting. Same thing with like the concept of loving your body. Mm-hmm. I think, and I would have been in the same place years ago before I've done so much work on this. But, you know, for me, that felt like completely not available. And I think a lot of women feel the same way. Like, you know, again, loving themselves is just so far. But I think that's why it is important to talk about, because it's like, it doesn't have to be, it doesn't mean you're like, oh my gosh, I am picture perfect, flawless. I am a supermodel. You know what I mean? It's like, it's actually not about, you know, the physical at all, but like being able to truly love all parts of you. And yeah, the acceptance piece is so huge. But it's just always so interesting with language, like how, you know, it brings up different things for different people. And I think, and as women, we're really taught in so many different ways not to love ourselves. And again, like to actually abandon ourselves in so many ways to keep other people comfortable. And, you know, that it's actually not okay to be like, wow, I'm so beautiful. Like that is like a wild concept, you know, for women to even receive compliments and not say, oh no, this, you know, this that I'm wearing, or I feel like every time I tell a woman her hair looks great, they're like, oh, because I washed it for once. You know, we like all those little things. It's like, again, as women, we're really, really taught not to love ourselves. So it, you know, it's just very interesting how it is this radical, wild concept still to this day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I myself now to respond. I'd like to be in that position again for someone to say that to me, you know, and because I would just ask questions. I would be like, I mean, do you want to have a masturbation circle? Because we can. Do you know? But
hours. That's later.
And it was so aggressive. Like it was in front of people and it was like clearly attention seeking. But it's like actually those people are the ones that I want to bring in and I want to have conversations with, you know, because it's like you're a little angry kid, you know, you're like banging your feet on the ground. I love to bang my feet on the ground, you know, and it's like, but I do that because I need someone to help me. And sometimes I can't use my voice properly. So it's like, I mean, I feel like that all the time, but I bite my tongue now. But the people who don't, I would love to have conversations with those people. And I do that with myself on a daily basis when I feel like that little angsty girl inside comes out. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. So I know we could talk for hours and hours, but being mindful of our time here, I would love to hear your advice. Like if you were speaking to a woman who you shared your low point, like if a woman is where you were, if she's there today, what would you share with her? What would be so helpful for her to know?
Mm. Something what's coming to me is like what do you really want? Like that's what's coming to me is like I would ask it like what is it, like I knew that I didn't want to die, but again I didn't know how to live. So but I didn't even understand that what I just said until a few years ago. So I would just ask like what is it, what do you really want, you know, and what not only what do you want, not like material things, but like what do you want your life to look like, what do you want to feel like, because I don't think I even felt anything for so long. You know, I didn't know what it was like to be in my body. I didn't know what embodiment meant. I didn't know what integration meant. Um, so it's like what I needed was actually, I just needed to be held. Like I didn't believe that anybody loved me. I didn't believe that anybody cared about me. Like that's why I wanted to die, because it would have been better just to disappear. But I wanted to feel held and safe. And I can't say that I would have been able to articulate that at that time, but I hope that I would have the patience as myself right now to ask someone who was in my shoes long enough and like patiently just awaiting an answer of like, what do you want your life to look like? I think that that would be it, because that would be a big conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So good. And that was at my low point, my rock bottom. That was the question that I felt like came up. Like, what do you really want?
Yeah.
Because I created this whole mess of a life that I thought I should be creating, and it felt miserable. So, yeah, I love that. And like asking, yeah, how do you want to feel and what do you want your life experience to be like? Because I think, again, we can get into this, choose a path and kind of be on autopilot and not even realizing like this is not fulfilling at all.
Right.
And I think we can do that at any point. It just comes down to that decision that like, okay, what do I want? And, then taking the steps and being brave and going after it.
Yeah. Being brave for sure. Because when we're talking, I'm like, it took me so many patterns doing the same thing, just slightly differently. But I thought that it was enough of a change to be better, to be fixed. And for me, it was like restaurant industry. I would go to like a different restaurant and things would be different, or a different country and things would be different, a different boyfriend and things would be different. But it was like, I never actually took the time to be brave enough to ask what I wanted. I always just like assumed a different role that I thought would be good enough to make me feel better. And it did temporarily because it's all new and shiny, right? But yeah, it's funny. I've actually lived in this apartment 2 years, just a couple days ago, and I think I've only one time in my entire life renewed a lease. I've like broken every single lease I've ever been in because I go to a different country and move away and run away from all my problems. And so since I've been stuck in a good way, like I've chosen to stay in one location, like this is the most I've ever like felt the best in my body, because I'm not chasing things or people or again that like notion that I need to be fixed. And I do that right here and very quietly and isolated. But that's been a huge lesson for me, is like staying put, even though it might not be what I would technically want, but it's what I've needed. Knowing the difference between what I need and want also has been massive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Reminds me of that quote, like, wherever you go, there you are.
100%. That book was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. In the location, or like when this happens, like then I'll feel good. And yeah, I mean, as we know, that's a game we can't really win.
Yeah.
So yeah, and even the staying put, I feel like that's kind of a beautiful metaphor for like being in the work. And yeah, even when it's uncomfortable, like being willing to stay in it and look
Yep.
at things.
Yep. 100%.
feel it instead of, numbing and checking out. So
Mhm.
I'm happy you're here. It was such a blessing to have you come back into my world and then stay.
Yeah.
So I'm so happy to have you here close by.
Me too.
Yay. And there's a beautiful comment. It says, "Thank you, Kaleigh, for sharing your journey. You are so inspiring and I'm glad to know you." So I wanted to read that one. I feel the same.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing everything you shared today so beautifully, so vulnerably, and just my battery is dying, so it
Oh, no.
keeps popping up.
Yeah.
But we're good. 10%, so we're all good. Yeah, so thank you so much again for sharing, and just love you so much.
I love you too. Thank you, Justine. Thanks for having me. I always love doing this, even though I get scared.
So fun. And I'm like, how did an hour pass?
Yeah, that was really, really, really fast. Yeah.
Yes. All right, my dear. I will see you soon. And thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, please share, like, comment, let us know. And until next time, have a wonderful day.